In June of 2013, the world at large was introduced to World War Z, the Brad Pitt-centered blockbuster summer movie which basically butchered the story of the very book it was based on. But despite spitting on the narrative masterpiece that was Max Brooks' World War Z, the movie rendition, or adaptation, of this very story introduced us to one of the craziest zombie apocalypses in cinematic history. And while I know that some of you would prefer that I cover the book in my Could You Survive series, I frankly don't want to, at least not yet, because the Solanum virus of the book is just a diet wildfire virus. As such, I'm going to be covering the film incarnation of the Solanum virus, because to be honest, it's more entertaining and also far more terrifying. So do yourself a favor and sit back and relax, because this is going to be a fun one.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
As per usual, before we can deduce our odds of survival, we must first come to understand just how terrifying the undead really are. And in World War Z, they are nightmarishly fast, physically strong, insanely durable, and not only are they proficient climbers, they actually stack on top of each other like a literal human wave of death and destruction. You could literally find yourself within the confines of Attack on Titan-sized walls, and it wouldn't mean jack shit to these freaks, as they'll eventually scale your perimeter defenses, fall down straight from the stratosphere, impact the ground at terminal velocity, and then they'll just get up like it's another day at the fucking office. And to top all of this off, the only way to kill these things is by destroying the brain. That's right, they're actually undead. They aren't living infected like the zombies in 28 Days Later or The Last of Us. Now, unlike your typical zombie, Zeke doesn't aim to consume flesh but rather to spread the Solanum virus. As such, Zeke will immediately move on to its next living target the minute it manages to infect a healthy host. And when this fast-moving contagion clears an entire region, the undead enter a state of suspended animation, somehow avoiding the pitfalls of decomposition and cold weather, all while somehow sustaining themselves without any clear need for food or water, which means they'll likely be around for a very long time. This is basically like taking Zack Snyder's supernatural undead sprinters in Dawn of the Dead and injecting them with every steroid imaginable. Like, these zombies are literally juiced up beyond belief. Now, obviously, these monsters are attracted to noise and light sources, but surprisingly, they aren't attracted to people who are terminally ill. So, if you have late-stage cancer or ALS, Zeke will likely swipe left on you. How they can sense your piss-poor health is never really explained, but we are told that this is supposedly a smart way for the virus to spread, targeting only healthy hosts to avoid using someone who's already dying as a delivery system. But that doesn't really hold up under scrutiny when you think about it, because the virus kills you in 12 seconds anyway, and then brings you back as a reanimated corpse. The terminally ill person, which Zeke avoids like the plague, will turn long before something like Alzheimer's ever kills them. And last time I checked, nothing's less viable as a delivery system than a host that's a fucking corpse. Yet reanimated corpses are the one and only delivery system for the virus. So yeah, nevertheless, Zeke is undeniably one of the most dangerous undead threats in the zombie genre. So apparently in the movie, the origin of the virus is never fully revealed. Now, the first officially reported case pops up in South Korea, but we also hear about scattered outbreaks that were talked about like they were urban legends. The government of Israel picks up on these vague warnings and shockingly concludes that a zombie apocalypse is imminent, thus prompting them to build a massive wall that would make Donald Trump envious. Now, the virus itself is brutally straightforward. Its main method of transmission is through bites from the undead. But exposure to infected blood, scratches, or open wounds can also do the trick. Once infected, you've got as little as 12 seconds before you die and then subsequently turn. The only real way to stop the virus's hostile takeover of your body is via an immediate amputation of the bitten area. Assuming you're fast enough and lucky enough to get this done, and assuming that you can actually amputate that area without killing yourself. But when you step back and think about it, a virus like this shouldn't go global. It burns through hosts so fast and is reliant on physical contact that there really shouldn't be any time for long-distance transmission. Yet in the movie, it somehow explodes worldwide in a near-simultaneous outbreak, much like Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. By the way, this is worst-case scenario territory. No time to prepare, no safe zone, total chaos. It's happening everywhere all at once. Now, believe it or not, the film hints that air travel helped to fuel the spread of this epic contagion. But considering how fast the virus takes over a host, it's really hard to believe that a transatlantic flight would land anywhere besides the bottom of the fucking ocean. So yeah, I'm calling bullshit on that lazy-ass plot convenience, but I digress.
And I've got to say, in all honesty, it's the biggest piece of dog shit that I have ever heard.
Given everything that we've covered thus far, I think the answer to the question posed by this thought experiment is, frankly, self-evident. But for the sake of answering the question fully, let's go ahead and dive into the specifics anyway. For starters, if you're suffering from a terminal illness, you're basically fine, so long as you don't get indirectly killed by military actions or hostile survivors. You'd also have to survive in the long run until government forces liberate your specific region, something which could take some time. And obviously, you'll have to deal with the complete and total collapse of society. I'm talking about saying goodbye to the power grid, sayonara to the water distribution, treatment, and supply system, adios to the entire agricultural industry and the food it produces to feed millions of people, and Auf Wiedersehen to most lines of communication. But on the bright side, you'd likely have shit competition considering that most terminally ill people aren't really threats to anyone. That being said, you also have to consider that as a terminally ill individual, you'd have to survive in the long run without any of the medications you rely on. Unless you've managed to secure a large stockpile of said medicines and treatments, you're probably cooked if the cavalry doesn't arrive soon, which will likely be the case given that governments worldwide will be spread thin fighting a war on several dozen fronts. Production will have to be ramped up in secure safe zones. There will not be enough bullets, weaponry, fuel, manpower, human capital, and so forth to ensure a quick military victory. So yeah, you're likely gonna be on your own for quite some time, which isn't good news if you're terminally ill. But if you're not on the verge of dying from cancer, ALS, Alzheimer's, or some random cardiovascular disease, you're gonna be in for a rough fucking time, especially since most people tend to live in or near major metropolitan areas. As the outbreak occurs in nearly all major cities worldwide, you'll see highways get clogged, stores get looted, and people turn to violence all out of desperation. And you, likely being someone who lives in a major city or in close proximity to one, you will have to contend with all of this and literal waves of juiced up roid rage zombies, all without any real warning as well. And even if you manage to find temporary refuge behind castle walls, you will not be safe, unless you happen to have a significantly sized moat surrounding the perimeter of your fortress. That and a drawbridge. Now you might be safe in a bunker or sealed subway or even a soundproof basement, but you'll eventually run out of food and or water, all while the undead wait for you outside the confines of your shelter. And if you somehow manage to make it to a sparsely populated region, you won't be alone. The undead will be following you and every single refugee that managed to miraculously escape hell on earth. Oh, and remember, these areas will also have no power, no running water, no incoming food imports, no reliable lines of communication. These locations will have already seen the collapse of society. And given the self-interested nature of human beings, the survivors or inhabitants of said rural regions may not take too kindly to you arriving on their doorstep. The only way you could ever hope to survive this cataclysmic zombie pandemic would be if you lived out in the middle of nowhere, lived on an oil rig, lived on a big boat, or if you happen to have some very convenient connections and even plot armor. Barring those particular circumstances, you're either going to be joining Team Zach or you'll be dying as a direct result of violence, starvation, dehydration, and or exposure to the natural elements. But assuming you are able to survive until your region is liberated, odds are you will be enlisted as a conscript to fight the war against the undead. After all, the fucking movie is named World War Z. And this is a military campaign you may not survive, especially if you're forced to serve humanity as a frontline grunt. But if the military manages to take advantage of the undead's aversion to terminally ill persons, as they did at the end of the movie because of the actions of just one individual who may not exist in your timeline, you might just have a splendid time killing hordes of the undead. Anyways, if you like this sort of content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Click the bell as well if you'd like to be notified when I publish a new video. And always remember that you may opine anytime if you feel so inclined, down in the comments section. I'm Captain Gold, and I hope to see you in my next Gold Standard video.